I'm so excited, you guys, to introduce our next guest. So our next guest is Dr. Valerie Baker. She is a psychologist, author, and speaker. I'm going to read this because it's so impressive. So Dr. Valerie Baker has discovered the missing link to women's ultimate success and happiness based on the cutting-edge scientific evidence of genetic transmission of trauma. There's lots of research about this. It's really modern and cutting edge. It's incredible. She helps self-made women who feel like they're running into an invisible wall as they move toward greater visibility, success, freedom, and fulfillment to break out of their inner prison of ancestral, collective, personal, and soul trauma of oppression. Dr. Valerie's jailbreak system has helped thousands of women create extraordinary relationships, businesses, and health that are only possible on the outside. Of the jail. You can download her Self-Made Woman's Jailbreak System, 5 Steps from Frustration to Freedom and Fulfillment at www.drvalerie.com. So please help me welcome Dr. Valerie Baker. Thank you so much for coming. So I am so excited to have you here. We've had a couple of really great conversations over the last few months, weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And so we met because our work really dovetails very nicely with one another. And we met through Helen, which was pretty exciting. So all these networks of people really kind of connecting, networks of women really connecting, really powerful stuff to me. So we talked this morning about my work, about the United Queen archetype, the divided woman archetype, and how women face this really powerful system of division when we're little girls, and that it's an internalized system of oppression.
Yeah.
And I know that in your work, you deal a lot with an external and internal system of oppression. So would you mind just kind of leading us off a little bit and sharing a little bit about your research, and we can kind of jump in from there?
Yeah.
And I'll go to my questions after that, because I know that you have this whole theory about what keeps women from their ultimate success and happiness, right?
Yeah, so where do we begin? It's it's the external, it's the internal. I always love talking about this topic with women who show up to events like these, because to me it's a sign that you are wanting something more in your life. Who wants something more? Anything? Thank you. And this is really where this missing piece that I talk about is the missing piece to women's ultimate success and happiness begins to show up. It begins to get obvious. And I see it in women all the time, women I work with as clients. For example, my client Laurel, who has sold millions and millions of dollars worth of product for the company she worked for. When she started her own business, she was struggling with making a sale. And this may probably sound familiar to you too. Or my client Cora created a wellness business that was sustaining herself and her family, but she wanted to reach more people, more visibility, more impact. And every time she would actually approach an opportunity to step up to the next level, she would run into the inner critic, she would run into the imposter syndrome, and this would hold her back. Or sometimes the way this missing piece shows up is when a woman has met all of her goals. I was working with this woman who has actually retired at the peak of her career so that she can enjoy her life. And she couldn't. Her life was really good. But she was struggling with anxiety, depression. She was struggling with constant worry. And she was feeling guilty for feeling this way, for not being happy because her life was so good. And this is now why I love having these conversations, because women feel when we're reaching for more, we're running into this invisible wall, and we feel, because we're doing the inner work, we're learning the strategies, we're getting coaching, we're getting therapy. What's wrong with us? Because this is just not working. This is just not getting us there. And my core message is really that there's nothing wrong with us. Right. Yeah. There is nothing to fix, and that the invisible wall is real. And like Stacey said in the introduction, what creates this invisible wall is thousands of years of oppression. And now we have scientific evidence that trauma, including the trauma of oppression, is genetically transmitted. And so what this means for accomplished, enlightened, self-made women who are empowered, who come to events like this, right? What it means for us is that we were born into this invisible inner prison. We were born with these instructions for survival that this trauma created. And for thousands of years, these instructions for women, and this is especially where our works are so much alike, these instructions for women have been: be a good girl, a good wife, a good mother, be seen and not heard, don't be too smart, sacrifice yourself, serve everybody else. Does that sound familiar to anyone?
Yeah.
And no matter what, don't you ever, 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 ever reveal your true power, because you'll be burnt at the stake. Or as my mother said to me, no one would want to marry you.
Wow, what a message. Don't be too powerful or no one will want to marry you.
Yeah, I thought you were saying, what a mess. It is
Yeah.
a mess. And
It's
it is a
mess
message.
too. Yeah, what a messy message. What a dreadful message.
Yeah.
So okay, so this I'm definitely, we've already spoken, so I already know it's true, but there's, just hearing it again, it like brings it up to the surface for me that yes, there's so much similarity. For me, it's the divided woman, that we're born with this, we're born into this culture that says that we're going to put you on a track and you're going to be either a mipe or a misor. You're going to be, you're going to be this woman who's kind of motivated by power and authority, or you're going to be motivated by relationships and availability. You're not going to have this place where you're able to have those two things and bring them together and be whole and unified, right? So my research came out of my background in psychology and going through that whole process. Tell me a little bit about the background for you and your research and how you came to find this.
It was official and unofficial, the research. I'm really, I guess I'm a slow learner. So, I talk about this missing piece that I call patriarchal stress disorder. I refer to it as the invisible inner prison, right? That imprisons us. And I was rocking the prison life, just like all of my clients. I was just, my 2 graduate degrees in psychology, check. Successful, thriving private practice, married a good guy, had a wonderful daughter. And the best kept secret was that I wasn't happy and fulfilled. And it was really difficult to admit, even to myself. So I hid it by eating a little bit too much, sometimes drinking, sometimes Netflixing, sometimes working a little bit too much, until I ran into a health crisis that really stopped me dead in my tracks, and slowed me down enough to start wondering, well, how come my clients were having these breakthroughs, right? Clients I talked about earlier, like I was able to get them from where they were stuck to what they were envisioning. But I was still stuck, despite my degrees in psychology, despite having read every self-help book that I could get my hands on, years in therapy, years in personal development workshops. And then it dawned on me, thankfully, that's like the biggest research finding, light bulb. What was making a difference for my clients was that I was offering them the tools that healed trauma. Because every condition, be it anxiety, depression, be it confidence, being fear of visibility, fear of success, had underlying trauma. And I offered them mind, body, spirit tools to resolve. And then that's when they were making the shifts. For me, I wasn't doing that because I didn't think I had trauma. And I don't know if that sounds familiar to you, but then I had this divine download that, well, hey, there's research out there about trauma that is ancestral, that's genetically transmitted. Could this be my invisible inner prison where I'm stuck? And so I started healing this within myself using the same tools, and my life transformed. I finally became the beneficiary of my own work, where now I'm privileged to coach women leaders in their jailbreaks. I'm now in an amazing relationship that's beyond my wildest dreams. And so I guess the background of this is really, I studied the topic of transformation. I've been I wrote my dissertation on it. I taught it. I used it in my work, and I was lagging way behind because I couldn't see the invisible prison myself until I saw it. And then once I saw it, I started talking to women like you, women who are like, oh, patriarchal stress disorder. Well, that makes sense.
So talk a little bit about that. So you just touched on it briefly. So I know, when you and I've talked about it, you called it the invisible prison. So how does that show up? So when you talk about the invisible prison of patriarchy stress disorder.
We can call it PSD. It's
PSD.
a mouthful.
But I think it's really important that people understand what we're talking about, because I think, as your work has kind of exploded for me when we've talked about it, it's definitive. It's got its own set of parameters, and I think it's going to be really useful if people understand kind of what the parameters are, how they can recognize it in their own lives, make sense of it for themselves. So could you give us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it'll be my pleasure. So I need more jailbreakers. The planet needs more jailbreakers. Putting this in context, I always like to put this in context, because sometimes it's hard to see. The prison is invisible, right? Putting this in context, for thousands of years, women couldn't make our own choices. We couldn't make our own choices. We couldn't even have our own money. In the US until 1975, a woman couldn't open her own bank account or take out a line of credit without a male co-signer. Thank you.
1975. Can we just sit with that for a minute? That's
not ancient history.
Some people sitting up here's lifetime. I was 6, but it's still within my lifetime. That's pretty extraordinary to me.
Yeah. So what we learned, because oppression is traumatic, that's another piece of content. And what trauma teaches us is to survive, is to create trauma adaptations. And these adaptations keep us safe from going where it's unsafe, aka being visible, being powerful, having money, being exuberantly happy. It's not safe, right? It's not allowed. And so how PSD actually manifests is by anything that is stopping you from claiming that more that you desire. And I call those things that stop us prison guards. And they manifest in our thoughts, they manifest in our bodies, and in actions. And some examples that you may be familiar with, those prison guards, are the inner critic, procrastination, perfectionism, mental fog, lack of focus, lack of concentration, fatigue. I work with so many successful women who've blown out their adrenals because, push against all this resistance, right? Fatigue, what else on the body level? Anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping. And on the level of actions, it's addictive behaviors, it's distractions, it's inaction. And sometimes we even manifest from our subconscious, the events in our lives that sidetrack our efforts. Because that's also one of the ways to keep us imprisoned. And so the core message is get to know these prison guards. They're not bad guys. They're there to genuinely keep us safe. And the takeaway is, and by the way, we are so invested in that prison system. The consensus among my clients has been that it's at least 90% of our time and energy that's invested in maintaining this prison security system.
Internal security system.
Internal.
Yeah.
Because just as you go through your day, notice how much time and energy do you spend negotiating the inner critic, or self-doubt, indecision, or summoning the energy and the courage to do something, right? It's exhausting. And then over time, we can also get sick from that.
That's so powerful, Valerie, because, when we were talking earlier, and you and I have had a couple of conversations about my work. So I'm curious to hear, because we've talked here about this idea of personal sovereignty and authority, having the right to own yourself, right? To where you are not giving yourself away to an external idea of who you are. And for me, the idea of the divided woman and the work that I'm doing is that when you're put into that archetype, right, of the divided woman, and then you are put on a track of a sub-archetype, you are in the prison, right? That's being sent to jail right there, right? Because you're in it, and there's no way out. It's like the panopticon, right? There's no way out. So I'm just curious, from your point of view, like knowing what you know about my work and me knowing a little bit about your work, like can we kind of get a dialogue going about where do they intersect, and what does that look like to you?
Yeah. So a couple of things that come to mind immediately is the patriarchal tactic of divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Right? It's fracture and lock away the power of a woman. And it does it to men as well, by the way. Absolutely. It's just because divide and conquer. And when we are not whole, our whole power cannot really rock the boat all that much, right? The status quo is safe. And another thing has to do with safety. Being within the prison of a particular archetype, that's safety, that's predictability, that's cultural approval. And going back to trauma, right, that we've all inherited, trauma is so rooted, it's a biological response, and it creates this commitment to safety, to put safety first. And so that creates this attachment to archetypes and being a certain way, because safety first, right? Gotta survive.
Yeah.
And we've so excelled, we've developed that survival skill set so well. So I can see where your work shows this wide potential for a woman. Oh my gosh, so here are all these other outfits and all these other that you haven't tried on, all these other dances you haven't danced, all these expressions you haven't experienced. Here is the whole menu. Come out and play, and creating this awareness for the first time, I think it's such a powerful jailbreak moment.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say, because it's exactly the same thing I'm thinking. Like the whole idea is you're out of the jail, right? Is like when you walk into this idea that you're unifying those sub-archetypes, that the idea is you're breaking the jail, you're just obliterating it, right? It's like taking a hammer to a crystal and just being walls come down, right? Because you can't be in the jail if you have absolute control over yourself. Because you don't accept anymore that somebody has the right to tell you what the definition of your being is, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a teacher, what it means to be a therapist, what it means to be a wife, what it means to be a mother. Like, no, I could be however I choose to define those things. I have as much capacity to make those decisions over myself as anyone.
Yeah, so, and it starts with that permission. It starts with this voice. Thank you for standing in your leadership. Thank you for having this conversation. Thank you for giving permission to women who are tuning in just to look at our lives and consider. After you and I have talked, I started considering, wow, like how has this played out in my life, right? It took me a while to begin integrating. Trauma resolution, in essence, is integration, because trauma fractures our wholeness. And then all these parts of our authenticity that could be represented as different archetypes, right, are locked away, and it's not safe for us to go there because trauma creates so much pain and defenses around it. And when we heal it, we open the doors and we will let those parts out to play, we integrate them. So whether it starts from the top down, from the awareness, and then how do we do it, or from the bottom up, I mean, we all meet at the party.
Exactly. We all get our crowns together, right? We all get to wear our tiaras at the end. Cool. So if you were thinking about the people who are going to see the video and the people who are here in the audience today, like if you were going to give them, you know, the right advice for the right time, like I think always whoever needs to hear it is hearing it right now. Like, what would you say about if this resonates with you and you know that this is kind of what you're up against right now? What would you say about how to heal that inner prison? Like what's the first steps? Like, what do you do to jailbreak? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do? So I've been at it for a while as a geek and slow learner. 20,000 plus hours as a therapist and coach. And over this time, I've streamlined the tools into a 5-step system that I call as jailbreak system that you can download from my website. It's pretty descriptive. I geeked out on that one. And if I have a couple of minutes, I can walk through the steps, you know, so that you know, kind of get a preview of the coming attractions. You may be pleased to know that we've been actually covering step 1 already. Step 1 is waking up in prison.
Well, that sounds like a lot like what we were talking about earlier about naming it, right? You have to name what's happening.
Yeah, becoming aware and really making the invisible walls we've been running into visible.
Can I interject a question?
Yes, of course.
Having met my own inner critic, and she's really a terrible person. How do you confront her without ending up in solitary confinement? Analogy of like she's the prison warden, and if you backtalk, that's what happens to you.
Well, this is such a perfect foreshadowing of step 2 and step 3. So let me know if I don't answer your question, but this is perfect. So a couple of key frames is that shifting from calling her a terrible person, she may be really mean to you, and I'm sorry, it's a very common experience. All this internalized depression, right, and internalizes as this self-hate, and it's a lot to detox from. But at the core, her mission is to keep you safe from being too powerful, too happy, because that's been a punishable offense for thousands of years, right? And so in step 2, we meet our prison guards. We meet and greet them. We look at how they manifest in the mind through stories and thoughts that hold us back, right? And then in step 3, we actually befriend them and bribe them. We learn the tools and techniques. And these tools and techniques, one of the first things is establishing safety, embodied safety. Not just saying I'm safe, but actually establishing safety in the here and now. And we can actually do it in the here and now if we have like another minute for that. Okay. So very simply, feeling your feet on the floor. Feeling your feet on the floor. Feeling your body is supported by the chair. And notice how the mind wants to take over, but this is us getting in touch with the sensations. And taking a moment to feel the secure pull of gravity and how constant this is, no matter what's going on. There's nothing that can happen for us to lose this security, right? We're like right here, physical beings. Notice how the breath moves through the body. Tune into the sensations of breathing. Just notice, just feel. And then use your 5 senses to orient to the surrounding environment. Look at it, look at things, listen, touch something, feel it. If the senses of smell and taste are available to you right now, use them. And what we're doing right now is one of the tools of the jailbreak system that it may sound really, really simple, but it sends a signal to the hindbrain that's committed to our survival that right now nothing is threatening. It's not enough to just say, I'm safe, because your nervous system doesn't speak language. It doesn't.
Right.
Because it's in the hindbrain, not here. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then from there, we actually befriend the guards, and instead of blocking our jailbreak, we learn to follow them so that they show us exactly where we need to heal. What are you protecting me from?
Yeah.
And then we go there, and in the next step,
Where are the alligators? Yeah.
yeah. and then we dig the tunnel in the places that we've discovered. And that's deep trauma healing using the tools of mind, body, and spirit. And we emerge on the outside. And once we do, this is step 5. And interestingly, you would think that, oh, well, I'm done. But interestingly enough, it's just like when we come out of a dark room, our eyes take time to adjust and it hurts a little. That's where we begin to learn to let in all this pleasure and all this power back into our bodies and psyches and energy fields, because those channels have been so contracted by the trauma and they've been used so little over time. So we need to bring some specific practices to reawaken them, dilate them, reinforce them. And so this is where the sisterhood of jailbreakers becomes very, very essential. And this is a big part of my mission. I'm working on my book right now to help rally jailbreakers around this personal liberation that is also collective.
Right.
Because we're creating a new reality outside of the prison, and there are no blueprints. It's not our mother's reality. It's not our grandmother's. And you're all here breaking paradigms in whatever you're doing in the world. We all are. We're the first generation of women to be doing this. And so, good for you for doing this. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
You're all leaders. And if you want to learn more about the jailbreak, you can get it from my website, drvalerie.com or drvaleriebaker.com. And if you are impatient, by the way, like me, or all of my clients, you can also request, once you get the system, you can also request a one-on-one strategy session with me where we create a personalized jailbreak plan that you can put to use in your life.
Fantastic. Valerie, thank you so much. I'm sure this has been very powerful for me, and I know it's going to be super powerful for all kinds of people. Oh, we have a question. I'm so sorry. Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. Questions. I'm like watching the clock. Absolutely, please.
So I forget who was doing the research, but I read about the fact that they've studied cortisol levels in Holocaust survivors' descendants, and that's a trackable, clear phenomenon. That
Yes.
They have higher cortisol levels.
Yeah.
And so I'd be interested to know if in any of your work you have or would consider doing, like looking into the biochemistry possibly involved in this, and if that is trackably different in the generations between, like my grandmother, for example, grew up in a far stricter PSD situation than I did, or if I had a daughter, like somebody in their 20s now, theirs would be possibly even less. So I'm just curious if you've looked into that area at all.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm open if there is a university that wants to partner with me and do this research. I'm all for it. And the Holocaust survivors research that you're bringing up, it's been so pivotal. And I am surprised that not everybody knows about it. Not every therapist is actually using this. But when I have young Jewish women who are in their 20s or 30s, they've never experienced anything traumatic in their lives, but they exhibit very high levels of anxiety,
markers,
all the trauma markers, and then we start working on the trauma resolution. Whereas there is no trauma history in their lives, right? But then it resolves it. And to me, this is really the proof in the pudding. And it's not even, it would be a great study, but I am coming from an assumption that we all have trauma that we've inherited, whether it's like a teaspoon or a lake or an ocean, and the tools are the same. And our lives can be greatly improved from healing whatever amount, right? We can heal. And that also changes the healing of trauma. Trauma changes the DNA, and healing of trauma changes the DNA, so that we don't pass it along to new generations. We change the survival instructions for them to thriving or thrival. Is that even the word, instructions?
It is now, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it is now.
Thrival.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Thrival all the way.
Yeah, that's a new hashtag. Thrival instructions. I like that. That's our, not survival instructions, thrival instructions. This was so great.
Thank you.
And I'm so grateful. Thank you. I know that you came in a day early to your event to come talk to us. So thank you so much for doing that. And
it's
so
such a
wonderful to
pleasure.
have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you for your
absolutely.
attention and your questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much.